Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. And Patrick, it is time for our 2024 year in review show. It was a disappointing season ultimately, right? But it wasn't short on news or interesting tidbits. I think the first thing that we talk about is it didn't happen in 2024, but it's part of this season, this year's story, and that's Craig Counsell hired as Cubs manager. He was a free agent, but they stole the manager from one of their biggest rivals, a city that often is looked at as like Chicago's little, junior Chicago junior, whatever you want to call them. They have a little brother complex, things like that.
Yeah.
That out better than the Cubs for multiple years now, and it was viewed as Craig Counsell was a big reason why. I think we saw he wasn't the only reason why this season, but that in our last episode that we talked about shocking moments, this hire was the most shocking moment I think you and I have covered. And it will continue to be a storyline going forward, Cubs win or lose.
Yeah, it is just very, very Cubby occurrence to have the team finish with 83 wins under David Ross and under Craig Counsell. And for the Brewers to not only lose Counsell, but trade away Corbin Burns and not have Brandon Woodruff available to pitch and still just boat race the division. It was truly just wild to kind of see it unfold. And, I'd ask you, Sahadev, what were your first impressions of Craig Counsell as a guy to deal with on virtually an everyday basis from, February until the end of September?
Yeah, no, Counsell was fascinating to cover. Different type of humor, different type of you have to kind of feel comfortable that he's not fully judging you with everything, right? Because you could very well feel like, oh no, I'm being put on the spot here, or he's a little mean, or things like that. I think he has a very dry sense of humor. He doesn't he'll sometimes ask for more from you with your questions, or he'll challenge you on your questions. And if you don't have a way to fully back it up right away, that's when you're going to start feeling a little embarrassed. Learned that, I think we all learned that very early on, like whether we had a way to back up our questions or not. He's not afraid to put you on the spot, but he also understands what our job is. Like I learned that pretty quickly. Like it's not like he's anti-media or he can't give a good answer. I mean, look at the end of the season. We need to be building 90-win teams. I think shows us that this guy isn't afraid of speaking his mind. Like that's, I think, the biggest thing. And it's not just us. It go around the clubhouse. He was honest to everyone, and there were things sometimes I think he said early on in spring training that was like, is that going to tick that dude off? No, it's because he already told a guy that. Like he's told him, and he's like, if I've told this guy this, I'm gonna share it with you guys for the most part, right? There are things you don't say, but I found that interesting. How about you?
Yeah, very similar experiences, I would say. Sometimes Craig helped me spit out a question because I'm like, well, what are you talking about? What are you getting at? Then there are other times where it's just awkward to try to explain your concept while the marquee camera is going in the Wrigley interview room, and it looks like we're arguing or something, but no, it's actually just trying to, he wants to know exactly what you're asking, which goes back to your point of I think he understands our jobs in a very granular way. The story I'd like to write, and I don't know how I could do it, is lots of people say, and I agree with them, that Craig Counsell's a lot more humorous than you would think, than the kind of dour figure you saw in the Brewers dugout. And yet, whenever I ask someone for examples for it, it's very hard to articulate. So maybe that is something when we're in Mesa next year, we could try and get just a couple different anecdotes like that because it's hard to, if he tells us a funny story while we're kind of chatting in the dugout, that's obviously like not, enough that it's something off the wall. It's more just,
That's
amazing baseball career. So he's like knows all these characters and has been involved in so many big moments. It just doesn't really come across, but he's direct, he's detailed, he's organized. So like no issues there.
Yeah, no, good storyteller when he's off the record too, or even on the record. I remember someone, Jim Leland just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
And someone asked him about Jim Leland one day, and he had great stories, both on and off the record. It was just great stuff. I mean, you don't see that as often as you used to, I think, and it was just fun to cover. So the hiring of Counsell, I think, it did something. It created a dynamic for this organization, right? And that put the pressure on Jed Hoyer. And guess what? The Cubs didn't deliver this year. Like you said, same as last year or 2023 under Ross, 83 wins. So now who does it go to? It doesn't go to Craig Counsell. He's not feeling the heat. Jed Hoyer and company are feeling the heat. That was a big part of, especially with May and June. Remember, we'd go in that clubhouse after these losses, and everyone was like, it's going to turn. And eventually, I'll never forget Jameson Taillon in Milwaukee saying, he's like, we've been talking about how it's going to turn, and it was a week. Then it turned into a few weeks. Now it's been 2 months. And he was just like, we can't keep talking about it's going to turn. Like, we got to get it done. And, they played better. They didn't end up 10 games under 500. Like it was looking like it was going to be, but not good enough. And that puts the pressure on Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, and everyone else in that front office.
Yeah, I mean, it immediately flipped the dynamic. It was kind of wild how quickly, the hot seat job security questions flared up. And I think part of that was an organizational issue of how they framed the sell-off at 2021. And, you had Tom Ricketts on Marquee essentially saying, well, we're going to go right back out in the market and spend. And you think, oh, maybe they'll just replace those guys with free agents and big time free agents and get right back out there. That's not really what happened. And Jed saying, I don't know what the definition of a rebuild is, was just an unforced, silly error, but it created this kind of gray area, right? Or this like murkiness about what exactly are the Cubs doing, when I think internally they had a pretty clear directive in terms of what they wanted to do. And I think publicly, though, they kind of tried to play both sides of it and, just didn't come out and say certain obvious dynamics within their organization. And so, Jed's deliberateness is certainly a strength. It's why he has 3 World Series rings, but his cautiousness, which also helped, the Red Sox and the Cubs over the years, I think it really stood out this past year of, oh, okay, like you went out and fired David Ross and hire Craig Counsell, but then it sort of just stopped there in terms of like the big wow type of moves.
Right, exactly. The offseason was like a little underwhelming after Counsell. Got to give them credit for the moves they did make, though, right? Like they made some good moves. Michael Busch was a good acquisition, and who we're going to talk about right now, Shota Imanaga's breakout season. That is a hell of a signing after 1 year. That, like, first of all, like, just dealing with him, guy doesn't speak English, and his opening press conference, like, if you, like, for me to understand how difficult that is to do the Go Cubs Go thing, I try and talk in Spanish every once in a while to some of these players, and it's really hard and embarrassing. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I feel like such an idiot. Like, these guys are going to think I'm a moron. But you realize you listen to Shota do that, and all you can think is like, hey, great job. Like, we know how difficult that is. That's incredibly difficult. And you did that in front of cameras, introducing yourself to a whole new country and organization. Very
Yeah.
cool. Very, like, great way to start his Cubby career. And the performance, I mean, remember daily, like after every start, are we like, is this going to keep happening? Like,
Yeah.
remember, I was that Mets series in New York when he, like, we were surrounding him, and there were New York media because they were so impressed. There were
Mhm.
so many people there to come talk to him. And he had great lines. He talked about, like, what did you know about New York? It was like, I saw it in Spider-Man. Like,
Yeah.
that's funny. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
He has a great sense of humor, and he was great pitcher. One of the, in a disappointing season, a huge bright spot for the Cubs.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, just I know you're a big, you know, Illinois hoops guy, college sports fan. What do people talk about? Like winning the press conference, right? And usually that's
Yeah, yeah.
like a bad sign. Like his first moment was this unbelievable introduction to the city, and it just became this callback moment for everything he did throughout the year. I mean, the comparisons to Fernando Valenzuela, I
Oh,
mean,
right.
Cy Young Award. I mean, Jake Arrieta's Cy Young Award campaign, like it was kind of in that stratosphere. I mean, a guy who totally like put the Cubs on his back and like kept them afloat for months. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't remember their record in his starts and the record the rest of the season, but it's absurdly dramatic differences between Shota days and the rest of the 162 game schedule. And so I guess now be how can he top it? Can he match it? You know, what will his legacy sort of be as the Cubs are trying to be a player in the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes and be that destination for other Japanese players on the horizon. But yeah, I mean, realistically, he smashed every best case expectation for his first year on the north side.
And he showed personality on the mound too. It wasn't
Yeah,
just like
fun to watch.
fun to watch. Little like when he didn't get a call, it wasn't fully calling out the ump, but it like little like motions and
Yeah.
movements that kind of are enjoyable to watch. Counsell would talk about how smart he is on the field.
Mhm.
Just little things like when to run to first, when to like directing defenders, things like that. Like just like smart guy, fun to watch, great player, like a great story. Thankfully we had that to cover. Otherwise, it would have been a tough season. One other, at least in the second half, really positive story. Pete Crow-Armstrong. He was one of the rare bright spots, and I remember thinking, "Oof, this is a mess." When he came up,
Yeah.
talking to him, and this guy, he has a lot going on in his head, like because he has high expectations for himself and he wants to succeed, and he's succeeded a lot in life. You could tell he was overthinking things and pressing and trying to do too much, talking to the coaches, talking to Craig Counsell. Nobody was hiding that. Like, he wanted to live up to the hype. There was a point where we came into the season and we probably over talked too much about the high fastball, because you know what killed him? It was the slider in. And at a certain point, I remember turning to a reporter and saying, like, is he going to just stop swinging at that pitch? Because if the opposition knows, throw a slider down and in, and he's swinging. It's an easy out. This has gotten hard to watch. Something clicked. Something clicked in Kansas City. He got that leg kick, and it was like 180. Different player, and when he is succeeding, we just talked about how fun it is to watch Shota Imanaga. I'm not sure if we've seen anyone as fun to watch since Javier Baez at his peak. Like, that was some of the most fun I've had watching and covering a baseball player. The things he can do on the field when he's right are freakish, and it's fun. It's fun to watch.
I mean, absolute havoc is what he can cause out there. And I do think PCA kind of symbolizes a lot of things going on with this team. One, it's a call back to the 2021 trade deadline, trading Javi. It's like, okay, they needed like guys to start showing up from that trade deadline, and he did in a big way. I think you've written about this a lot, Sahadev, of how they worked with him and kind of the routine he developed, and he obviously deserves the credit for that. But the Cubs largely keeping a coaching staff intact, I think, is a recognition of kind of the developmental environment they've created, which is big. And then just the like, when you walk into the room of like, okay, who's the headline or not? And, PCA is certainly that, like a guy who can go viral, and also have to give him credit for being a very like thoughtful, expressive person. Like someone who's super young and who's had a lot thrown at him, he handled himself extremely well. We'll give you a good quote. Also, just kind of carries himself, I'd say, in a different way this past year, of just kind of a little calmer, very observant. Seeing what Nico, Hap, Dansby, all those guys are doing. So again, see if he can top it and continue on this ascent next year. But one of the rare, like, kind of, I don't know, bursts of energy around a team that was just so professional and kind of a little boring.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you're going too far by saying that at all. Like that's just, I mean, I don't think some of them would disagree. They're not looking.
It's kind of by design.
Yeah. But he is an outlier in that group. He also had tremendous respect for that group. Like I think they helped him a lot. Like you said, like he watched them, and I appreciate that. Like learn from those veterans, see their hard work, see that they go through struggles too, and they push through, and the work that they put in, and it's like. It's okay. Don't let it get you down. It's okay to sometimes take it hard, but you got to move on. You got to push through, continue to work. You're talented enough to figure these things out. I'm very curious to see how good he can be offensively. Like if he's that last 2 months, then we're talking about a very special talent. I think putting that on him is too much. That's unfair.
Yeah,
but if he can have stretches like that, 2-month stretches here and there, and he can put up even average offensive numbers, you have a very valuable player. Like that's the reality. So make that the floor, and then reach for higher, and we'll see where it goes. Patrick, the final story is the story we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks now, and it's been a while. It is the biggest story for the Cubs, I think, since the Craig Counsell hiring. And so it's fitting that we start with Craig Counsell, and we're going to wrap the show up with the Cubs acquired Kyle Tucker. Like, this is the biggest player move that Jed Hoyer has made in charge of the Cubs, acquisition that he's made. Like, think about it. Like, we wrote about this, but his Cubs career as team president started with releasing Kyle Schwarber, trading Yu Darvish. 6 months later, he's trading the most loved players of this generation.
Yes.
How could he, like, very hard to rebound from that. Like, almost instantly, he was behind the 8 ball as far as fan reaction. Fans aren't going to like that, no matter what no matter if it's the right moves or not. It's really hard to win over fans when you do that. So finally, there's some positive things that you can point to. A big move that you can complain about the price if that's what you're focusing on. Hey, let's watch some fun baseball is what I'd say. And maybe they'll win some games, more than 83 games this year, because Kyle Tucker's a difference maker. He's a superstar. He's that type of guy that changes the dynamic of a lineup. And for Jed Hoyer to make this bold move should be a good sign for Cubs fans.
Yeah, I know. I guess there's always a little risk with everything, but Oh, this guy seems pretty close to a sure thing. I mean, really good all-around skills, like an easy fit into this lineup. Someone who will certainly be motivated to play well next year, and go see what he can get. But I know we both did some reporting on this, but just the idea of like it took years for the Cubs to kind of get to this point, and how all these little moments and behind the scenes people helped push this forward, whether it was the deals that led up to this, and finding Christopher Morel or whatever it was, like you kind of drafting Cam Smith. Like there's a lot of, it's interesting to pull back and see all the things that went into this.
It's a sign of a healthy organization, which I think sometimes both of us fall into this trap. Fans certainly fall into this trap. Everyone does. That's not inside the org, even sometimes inside the org. Like it's very easy to look what's happening at the major league field and say, this is a disaster, right? This is not going well. This is really bad. Look, they need to win. Like I'm not going to blow them up and say like, hey, what a great job. They're an amazing organization. They're not there yet, but that is a good sign. There are some things that make me say, okay, you have my attention. I'm interested in what you're doing. Continue on that path. And you know what? Win at the major league level, because that's the bottom line, right? That's all we're like. At the end of the day, if they're not winning at the major league level, their jobs, it's going to cost them their jobs, right? But this is a sign that I think when you're able to acquire a guy like Kyle Tucker and you didn't destroy your major league roster or your minor league system by doing it, and look like, frankly, a better team, that's a good sign for your organization. And it's what we need to see more of going forward. Like we wrote, find the next Cam Smith, and then, do more this offseason. And that's what we're going to be talking about over the next, what is it, a month and a half before Patrick, it's coming close. A month and a half from now, we will be heading to Arizona. So that's the storyline for the next 6 weeks. Let's figure out how they get better. What more are they going to do? What's the 2025 year in review going to look like? Hopefully, it's not. We're not talking about 83 wins.
That would be so Cub though.
I really don't want to talk about 83 wins against Patrick.
Gotta be like 90 wins or 90 losses, like just some sort of like,
Let's make sure you, me, and Jesse aren't making Cancun plans for October 4th. Or at least we can't do that in August,
Yes, as always, we'll definitely get our buddy Jesse Rogers on to break it down in that case. But yeah, it'll be, I don't know. I'm appreciative, and I know you are as well, of like, I don't know, the Cubs are good, the Cubs are bad. Like, who cares? Like, they're always, entertaining.
Yeah.
There's always so much to write about. A lot of it's, barely baseball adjacent. And it's a privilege to, work in a city like this on platforms like this. So very, very grateful as we head into 2025.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to wrap it up. And I agree. Thank you for listening. Like, truly, you guys have made sure that this podcast is like started off small and we're growing quickly, and we truly appreciate it. We hope for big things in 2025. Keep subscribing, tell your friends, tweet it out, do whatever you can. We're really happy to have you listening. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Subscribe to The Athletic. Patrick and I will be on top of all of this. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Have a happy new year.